Okay, that was the easy part. Let's get to the hard part. I promised in the blurb for this sermon that I would explain how we maintain that inherent you optimism in the face of the terrible things that life sometimes throws at us. And then when I was writing this, I kind of regretted having made that promise. The truth is, I don't know. I don't know how to tell you how to be optimistic in the face of whatever might come your way. Adversity is too personal and too specific. And no matter what we share and experience, the hard things in life are always different in their details from one person to the next. I can tell you, though, that the beginning of maintaining that optimism is setting down our roots in a strong, optimistic community. And I can tell you that if you practice finding what is positive about your own life and the world around you, it becomes easier and easier to see the good when the bad gets a temporary upper hand. And I can tell you that if you're always waiting around for some moment of catastrophe, like my Aunt Evelyn, you're likely to find yourself paralyzed and trapped within that tragedy, should it ever come or even threaten to come. I was in danger myself of being overwhelmed just last year. My mother-in-law was terminally ill, and the calcium in her blood had reached a dangerously high level that left her mentally unstable. She was unable to walk as well. She was at home, and as her situation deteriorated at a meteoric rate, we were left scrambling, trying to find appropriate daily care for her. One morning, I went over to stay with her while my brother-in-law, who's a nurse, headed off for work. I was concerned that I wouldn't be equipped to deal with her, but he assured me that he would only be gone an hour or so. She's eaten and gone to the bathroom, he said, so she'll just sleep the whole time I'm gone. Still, I was terrified of the possibility of taking her to the bathroom, as I didn't have any experience getting someone in that state out of bed. More importantly, I kept thinking back to when she was well and how mortified she and I would have been for her dignity and her privacy to be invaded. Well, there I was, alone with her. She was quietly sleeping at first, but that didn't last long. About 15 minutes later, she had her legs hanging over the side of the bed, and she was loudly demanding to be taken to the bathroom. Nothing, I said, could dissuade her to wait until her son came home. So, somehow, with a lot of sweating and straining as she outweighed me by several pounds, I lifted her off the bed, and after, I confess, an unexpected but gentle detour to the floor, I finally got her in a wheelchair. I took her to the bathroom and got her settled in. Sweat was pouring down my face, and I was standing angled away from her, but still very close, trying to give her a moment of privacy, even if she weren't aware of it, but still staying close in case I was needed. Mentally and physically, I was shaken to my very core. And I'll never forget what happened then. From out of the haze of confusion, her face cleared for a moment. With the casual tone of someone inviting another to join her in her parlor, she gestured toward the wheelchair, which was just a couple of feet from the toilet where she sat, and said, "Have a seat." It might have been a garden party she was asking me to take part in. I burst out laughing, and she laughed too, before the veil of confusion dropped over her face again. But what I remember about that moment was the realization hitting me that I was actually standing right in the middle of one of my worst fears. I was in my own personal flood, if you will. And in that split second, I had found a moment of humor. We had shared a flash of understanding of the absurdity of this ghoulish situation that put everything into perspective for me. That moment of humor and connection reminded me of who I was and the optimistic outlook I had on life. And I knew then that I could get through it. That's what I mean when I say there isn't some magic formula for getting through every crisis. Each one is different, and you have to find those moments that connect you back with who you are as an optimistic human being. And you hold on to them like a life raft, at least until the next one comes along. The problem is that some people don't create that optimistic foundation for themselves ahead of time. If I hadn't been practicing looking for the good or the potential for good in a situation, if I hadn't had a community like this church to support me, I think that moment in the bathroom would have sailed by me unaware, leaving me still struggling in my own personal floodwater. Here's another story about someone literally confronting the flood, pulled from the news over the last few weeks. Now picture this. His name is Masahiro Kazumatsu. He's 76 years old. After the tsunami in Japan strikes, he watches, horrified, as on TV, during his daughter's normal shift, the water engulfs the airport she works in, leaving it completely underwater. He's located many miles from there, and he calls and calls his daughter's cell phone. She never answers. He waits and waits to hear from her, checking daily for the names of the dead, but his daughter's is never amongst them. So, getting into his car, despite being warned that he will never be able to reach his daughter in Sendai, he begins what should have been a half-day's journey that turns into a 5-day journey. The roads are almost impassable, and very quickly on, his car gets stuck in the mud. It doesn't matter though, there's no gas to refill it anyway, so he begins to walk, passing horrors along the way. I know that my daughter may be just one more person among so many dead, he says, but my deepest hope is that she is alive. And on he walks, on through the water and through the mud until he finally reaches the devastated airport where his daughter works. And outside he finds a security guard and begs him for information about his daughter. The man consults a list and says, "Your daughter just went home. She's okay." As he moves on, Kazumatsu is left quietly repeating, "She's okay. She's okay." Now, I am certain there are many similar examples of people who were not so fortunate. The point is that in the face of extreme adversity, this man took action, exhibiting an inspiring practical optimism that motivated him to act when others would have been overwhelmed. That's the kind of person I strive to be, and I know being a member of this community is part of how I keep this foremost in my mind. And I think that's ingrained in every one of us. We just need to work to cultivate it more. The question then becomes, what do we do as optimistic people in the meantime when our lives are more likely to revolve around less dramatic events than floods and tsunamis? For starters, every day we can seek out something to do, big or small. There are lots of places we can start. It can be helping with outreach programs here at church, like preparing meals with A's Teen Ministries, or maybe we could just do a better job at home recycling to help care for our planet. Or it could be as simple as even just saying hello to that clerk at the grocery store who looks unappreciated and unhappy. And maybe that changes her outlook that day and helps her interact with her family more positively that night. And maybe that means they go out in the world and do better things than they would have done, and so on. Yes, it's a romantic viewpoint, but the point is that the possibility is there. And if we're always looking for that possibility and we're acting on it, then we can change the world. If that makes me sound like an optimist, then come on, bring on the jokes. I am one. Now, as for my Aunt Evelyn, she's changed her tune over the years. Now when you ask her why she has all the secondhand china and thrift store tables and chairs stuffing her home, instead of answering that she's waiting for doomsday, she says, "Well, Sugar Pop, you never know when you're going to have a great big party, and you can always use some extra plates." That's a step in the right direction.